there is a common misconception that your brain stops developing when you're 25. There was a very famous study where they were trying to prove that your brain continues developing into your 20s. However, a lot of people use this as an excuse to say, your brain is still developing, so when you're in your early 20s, you're still a proto-adult. But the thing is, the study that they're using for all of this, the oldest participant they had was 25.
Welcome to the Coffeeshop AU. I'm Jay, your host. I am trans, non-binary, neurodivergent, and currently live in Seoul, Korea. My pronouns are they, them, and I believe that queer folks like me deserve more safe spaces to tell our stories our way. And to help me do that, my friend El is joining me today to share her story in her own words. We are also joined by her two cats, Nix and Aster. Hi El, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying my water that you've been kind enough to provide to me. I'm good. How are you? Wait, I already asked you that.
I'm a little tired, but I'm good.
Good. So I'm drinking water. You're not drinking anything because we literally just went for coffee at a cafe downstairs. So we're good for drinks. By the way, just a heads up, if you hear any kind of like scratching noises in the background in this episode, it is probably Aster eating or playing. Yeah, the cats are very active and about, and they are in the same space as us, just watching us as we tell these very important stories. So that's what that is. Yeah, we just had some drinks downstairs at a cafe before coming up to your flat to record this conversation. And I had a warm latte with some like cinnamon sprinkled on top. And the mug was super cute. And I took a billion pictures of it. So I'm going to be uploading some of that to Instagram. What did you have?
I had an iced matcha latte because without it, I will die.
You also had a nice scone to go with it too.
Yeah, it was an Earl Grey scone.
Oh, was it? I thought it looked green. Was it not green? Is my memory already distorted?
I don't think it was green.
Okay, my memory's not great right now. But yeah, so do you want to tell me a little bit about where we are?
Well, right now we're sitting at my table with a very curious black cat just to the right of me. And we're in my loft apartment directly across from the police station.
So it's going to be a little bit noisy. Maybe there's going to be a little bit of a background noise. And also cat opinions, which are always welcome.
Do you think so?
Nix is very vocal. I like that about him. So, yes, we're sitting in your flat just outside of Seoul. And it's kind of like a chilly, nice day. And we haven't seen each other in a while. So we did a lot of catching up before we came up here to record this little chat. I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious because your cats, for whatever reason, they've both decided to sit right next to us as we are doing this recording. And they are staying. So
I'll be 100% honest. This is very unusual. Normally, whenever people come over, they run to high places and avoid until they feel more comfortable. But I have also noticed, because I am a floor troll and I spend all of my time sitting on the floor, when people come over and we sit together on the ground, they get much more comfortable more quickly. And they're very suspicious when people come over and we sit in chairs.
But we are sitting in chairs right now. I'm confused. Well, I guess cats will be cats.
They sure will.
Where do the names come from?
Okay, well, Nix is an all-black cat, and when I first adopted him from the shelter, he was very sleepy because I did not know he was incubating a respiratory infection. But I named him Nix for the goddess of night because he had a very calming and soothing presence. I think he agrees. On the other hand, I like to say that Aster came into my life like an asteroid. And when I was picking out his name as Nix, I needed something that felt thematically appropriate. So Aster is the name of a group of flowers that are named for their like sun or star-based shape. And since Aster is a beautiful little flower with the fiery burning passion of 1,000 stars, I thought Aster could be a good name for her. And then they have completely changed their personalities since they were kittens.
Right. There's definitely a more solar energy coming off of Nyx. And Aster she seems to prefer the shadows a bit more.
She has also made it her life's mission to be the best girl in the entire world, and Nyx has made it his mission to bother everyone all the time.
If I had to choose between the two, I would take Nyx's attitude. Just because, yeah, I like engagement. Actually, RV, who you also know, we had a conversation earlier, and her first impression of me was a person with a black cat energy. And I was like, yeah, I think that tracks. But this black cat, Nyx, is... He just yawned. Definitely has like not the traditional black cat energy. He's very curious, very like up in your face, and rubbing his face on the mic pole. Interesting choice. And I'm kind of rambling because he is too beautiful and very distracting. So I'm gonna turn back now my attention.
I will tell you, he's not like this with anybody else.
Really?
Yeah.
He just really likes me? Do you really like me, Nyx?
He doesn't like to get all up and personal with anybody who comes in the room. He's always hidden for a way longer time.
Wow. I feel honored. I feel like we need to actually explain a little bit about the name that you've chosen to go with. It was a very spur of the moment thing.
It was a very spur of the moment thing, but you mentioned that when you were talking with our friend Leia that there was a new non-binary French pronoun that was being used, and it was el.
I-E-L.
And my first instinct was very boring and just going with the letter L.
Which is the initial of your first name.
But el is much better and more interesting and fun.
And fun, yeah. When Leia told me about that pronoun, I was like, that sounds like a cool name. And I okay. Sorry, Nyx is all over our table right now. He's exploring. He's really exploring. Step on those pages.
Crinkle them.
Smell my water.
Crinkle it all. Make so much noise. Be so distracting.
God, he's beautiful. What can you tell us about yourself other than the fact that you are a proud mom of 2 beautiful, beautiful cats?
Okay, well, I'm El. I use mostly she pronouns, but they pronouns are fine, and anything else is also fine too, to be honest. It's just a word. For me, I am extremely white. And I'm from North America. Northern part of North America.
Right. You're a northerner, just like me, just from different parts of the world. When did you come to Korea?
I first came to Korea in 2015, and I was in Korea for a year. Then I went and did my master's degree in Scotland. And after finishing that, I came back, and I have been in Korea since.
Right. How is life in Korea? How has it been for you?
I'm still here, so it has definitely been good for me. Like everything, there are pros and cons, but I am able to live a life that I don't think that I would be able to live or afford to be able to live in a lot of other places here, and I'm very happy and content with that.
Wonderful. Do you think Korea is very different from where you used to live?
Yes.
For better?
Mostly, yeah.
What are some of the things that you enjoy about living in Korea?
I really enjoy not needing to have a car.
Oh, yeah.
I can travel as much as I want, and I don't need to own a vehicle, which is an additional expense. And I can afford to live alone in my own apartment. And I can afford to take care of 2 cats. And I have a job that allows me to afford to go on vacation every so often. And the healthcare is quite phenomenal. In comparison to a lot of other places.
I agree with that. The healthcare part, I cannot complain about. So what would you say are like some of the cons for you personally?
For me personally, I'm a vegetarian and I don't like cooking. There's not a lot of easy vegetarian options to find, although it is getting better.
Yeah.
It's getting a lot better over time. But I feel like because I don't like cooking and I don't want to cook, I tend to eat less healthily than I should. I also wish that I spoke Korean better because it has been a while and I just haven't had the mental energy to give the practice that it requires to become better at Korean because the job is time consuming and energy consuming.
Yeah. I've witnessed exactly how time consuming and energy consuming your job can be, which is teaching English at an academy.
We mostly teach older elementary students and middle schoolers, so they're all busy. We keep them more busy, but I do like knowing that they have a few people in their lives who understand how busy they are and how stressed they are and can give them an understanding situation where they can both express themselves and think and experience life a little bit differently.
Oh, that's really nice. Would you recommend this job to anybody who's considering coming to Korea from an English-speaking country? What kind of person do you think would enjoy this job? I'm just curious.
Someone who really likes people and is very extroverted. Someone who has a passion for teaching. I mean, that's not me, but it would be a good thing for people like that. I think there's a lot of space in the academy system for different viewpoints to give the children a wider view of the world just by having teachers from different English-speaking countries rather than just North America or even just England. Actually, no, I don't think I've had a lot of other English teachers be from England. Mostly they're from North America.
I've met maybe one or two English people the entire time I've been here. I've met one Irish person and maybe one Scottish person. I don't even know if they were in the teaching profession. I think we do get a lot of like North American folks coming to teach English, which is fine, but like you said, I think it's great for children to be exposed to different cultures and different accents, to be honest. So hopefully we're gonna get that sometime soon. We've known each other for about 4 years, but that might be wrong. 3-4 years, something like that.
I think we met in February 2021.
2021.
Yes.
So we've known each other 3 years. That's a long time. Do you remember the first time we met?
Very vividly.
Okay.
I was terrified.
What? Why?
Because meeting new people makes me anxious.
Really? I could not tell.
I'm very good at pretending.
I mean, you seemed so serene, just like water. That was my impression of you. You're like still water. And then you told me that you were an anarchist. And I was like, huh, okay. I think I need to look into what that means. Because I don't have a good understanding of that term. But I feel like we kind of got along really smoothly. So that was my first impression of you.
My first impression of you was that you were too cool.
Too cool.
Too cool for me.
Oh, wow. Really?
You just looked very put together. You had a style, and you just seemed very cool. And I was like, wow, a cool person.
You know what? I think that's my go-to when I'm feeling nervous or if I'm uncertain. I just put on this facade of like, nothing can bother me. And inside I'm like Aster. I have to watch from a loft corner to see what's going to happen.
I think that's also my go-to because when you grow up dancing, the show must go on. No matter what happens, you pretend it's not happening. Your face does not show that you're putting in any effort at all ever.
Right.
So it's probably similar.
Yeah. That makes sense. I feel like there is a core to each of us that is calm, but in between the outermost layer, which also is calm, we've learned to put on that face. In between that layer and our core, there is a middle layer that is filled with anxiety.
Mine is probably a mixture of anxiety and pure chaos.
You mean your middle layer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. You do have like and I say this with like the utmost respect. Under your very, very, very calm and collected layer, during that first meeting, I did get a glimpse of a
Chaotic gremlin.
No, I wouldn't say gremlin. I would say nonchalantly unhinged. Like, like mad scientist energy. It's like you are very sure of what you're about and you don't care if anybody else gets it or not. And I feel like at our first meeting, some of that came through and it intrigued me. And in our subsequent meetings, it surfaced more and more until both our chaoses met each other, greeted each other, and we just like acknowledged that in each other. I admire that about you because you have no trouble admitting that you're like, yes, I build, what is that thing that you worked on with the Furbies?
Long Furby.
Oh, I build long Furbies. That's my pastime, and let me show you how it looks. And it's amazing and awesome. But you also did tell me that you lost some friends over that project once you finished it, right? Some people just don't get it.
They didn't come over to my house again after that.
Okay.
And I assume that that's why, because they made a point to say, why does it look like that? It's so scary.
Clearly they have poor taste.
Who doesn't love a galaxy dragon long Furby?
Right. That's what I thought. When you showed me, and it was a Furby that was taller than you. It had wings that looked like the galaxy, and it was just like pitch black. I just thought, this is wonderful. And I feel like that is you, the long Furby, is your personality, and you don't really care who sees it and whether they get it or not. And I really like that about you.
That's one of the kindest ways someone has ever described me, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Would you say that our friendship and bond grew over time, over the strange things that we each appreciate?
Yes, definitely. I think I really appreciate when people can admit that they love things and just want to share them with each other. And you don't necessarily have to understand other people's love for that thing to appreciate them wanting to share it with you.
Yes. I feel that way a lot in this friendship. I may not always understand the things that you show me or share with me, but I appreciate your enthusiasm for those things. And I think it works vice versa as well. Mm-hmm. I will chew your ear off about Our Flag Means Death, even though you've never seen... Oh, no, we did actually watch one episode.
We watched one episode?
Yes, and...
It was delightful.
Oh, okay, great.
I loved it. I just don't watch TV. If other people are there and they want to watch TV with me, I will watch it, and I will probably enjoy myself. I just, on my own, I can't watch TV.
That's totally valid. But yeah, I'll talk to you about whatever shows I've been watching lately, and then you'll talk to me about stories you're working on or the D&D game that you've been playing with your friends. And I know nothing about D&D, but I have been learning from you. And isn't it wonderful to let each other in on the things that are unfamiliar to them? I think it's wonderful.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah. I do feel like our friendship is built on like pure joy. And our respective enthusiasm for the things that we're really, really, really into that are pretty niche. And it's rare that you can unabashedly like share that side of yourself with another person, especially somewhere around like the mid-20s mark. I feel like it becomes socially inappropriate to just wholeheartedly express your love for something and have it not be perceived as weird.
I do think a lot of that has to do with traditional life path. By that point, you're supposed to be an adult with responsibilities, doing specific things with your time that don't necessarily cause people to go write fan fiction or go draw fan art or go create a 6-foot-tall Furby. You know, at that point, you're supposed to be in a committed relationship and trying to get a house and a job and all of those sorts of preconceived ideas of what life should be like. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for just passionate excitement for the joy of living.
Right. I think if there is one thing that sometimes scares me about our friendship is that we can really let go and get very chaotic. Just let chaos run everything. Sometimes... No, like I can get a little bit like scared of how much I'm enjoying myself, and then it occurs to me like, but wait, Why am I scared? This is the point of living. We're here to enjoy ourselves and enjoy the things that don't necessarily bring us money or prestige, but are just lovely to us. And I think you are a very good reminder of that in my life, where sometimes there aren't a lot of other reminders. So I really appreciate your friendship.
Thank you.
A while ago, you told me, while we're having this slightly unhinged conversation about our flagman's death and Doctor Who and the story you're writing about meerkats,
Oh, yeah.
and the story I was writing about my boarding school experience. I went to a boarding school. It was chaos, shared by like 300 people, or all teenagers. So while we were doing that, you shared with me about your gender identity, and I've known about your asexuality for quite a while, because I think that was one of the first things that you shared with me. But we hadn't talked about your gender in detail that much until then. So if you don't mind describing that to us for the listeners.
Gender specifically or all of it?
Gender specifically,
Okay.
please. And I'm speaking this way because Nix is right next to me and I don't want to provoke him into doing something even more entitled than what he's doing now, which is pushing his face into my bag.
It smells good, though.
I know, I smell amazing. And everything I own smells amazing.
I think for a long time, I didn't really think about my gender identity. I think who I am as a person has been very shaped by growing up AFAB. So there is a lot of probably femme energy about me no matter what. But when I'm actually thinking about my gender identity, I don't really feel any strong connection towards much of anything. Sometimes I feel like empowered in a feminine way, in the way that all of the teenage misunderstood AFABs want to go off and be witches in the forest and curse the rest of humanity, or go and be a bog witch.
Accurate.
But most of the time, I find gender and the idea of being a woman specifically is very tied to sexuality. Mm-hmm. And as an extremely agender, aromantic, asexual person, I don't feel tied to that at all. If people call me she and talk to me as a girl, that's fine, because that isn't implying anything about my sexuality. But if people talk to me as a woman, it makes me feel extremely uncomfortable, because it's implying something about what is expected of you as an adult woman to want and to enjoy in terms of sexuality. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel tied to that at all. So I definitely feel like agender, non-binary in that kind of way, but I've been thinking about it a lot since then. And mostly I'm just realizing that what I used to think was a childhood like celebrity or fictional crush on Link from The Legend of Zelda and Wesley from The Princess Bride was actually just wanting to be an androgynous twunk going around and saving the world.
Okay. This is a good example of your unabashedly, openly, straightforwardly sharing something that you specifically love and embrace and is part of your personhood with me. And I have to ask some questions. What is a thunk, first of all?
Twunk.
Twunk. Twunk.
So it is a cross between a twink and a hunk.
Ooh.
It's a twunk.
There's a word for that.
I didn't know it until I was obsessively drawing Link fan art, and I found a random post online talking about how, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was saying, just imagine it, Link comes out of the forest with a giant sword, usually a musical, magical weapon, saves the entire day all by himself, and then disappears into the forest. He's a bard. Mm-hmm. In terms of D&D classes.
I know what bard is because you explained it to me.
Yes. So bard is basically, if you think fantasy bards going around sharing stories, yes, but if you know D&D, you also tend to know that bards tend to be very forward and flirtatious, usually, and they use a lot of their charisma to get what they want, and then also they use their charisma to be disarming in order to help them save the world.
It's literally Chris Pine's character in
Honor Among Thieves.
Honor Among Thieves, which
Yes.
is the movie
Yes.
take version of the D&D game. Like one version of a D&D world. So, what you're telling me is that in terms of your gender, you had a crush on Link from Legend of Zelda.
I thought I had a crush.
Yes. And who's the other person? Who's the other character?
I should have looked up how to say his name before I brought him up on a podcast, but he was Wesley from The Princess Bride, played by the actor Cary Elwes.
Okay. We're going to fact check that later on.
That might not be the correct way to pronounce his last name, but basically he's a pirate who goes off to save the love of his life
Oh.
in the story.
Oh. And you thought that you had a crush on those characters when actually, maybe, in reality, you identified with their presentation.
Yes.
Okay. Can you be a little bit more descriptive of, like, the way they come across to other people? Like, because thunk?
Twunk.
Twunk it's just a new term for me. So,
Yes,
like, if
that's
you,
fair.
If you could find a slightly different way to describe that.
So I would say strong.
Thunk just sounds so dumb.
Because it's not thunk, it's twunk. Anyway, it's a hunky twink. If you just think of it like that, a hunky twink.
Like a jock bottom
Yeah.
in gay porn.
Exactly. So they're built and strong and extremely athletic, especially in terms of fighting and saving the world. But also at the same time, they're not super masculine bodybuilder, macho Superman sort of thing. They're much more androgynous, but strong.
Ooh, that's a very appealing image. And so, just to connect that back to how you said that if somebody describes you or like interacts with you in a way that they would with a girl or like a young femme person who doesn't have any like expectations of being objectified or having sort of sexuality attached to them, then that's okay with you. That feels natural to you, but being referred to as a woman or being perceived as a woman makes you feel uncomfortable. How is that related to the twunk feeling?
I think as a girl, because sexuality isn't sort of enforced necessarily all the time in every single way. And as a girl before puberty, your figure is different. And as a girl before puberty, your figure is less objectified in the mainstream.
Yeah.
So I think that is sort of connected to the body, not necessarily dysmorphia, but the amount of comfort I feel in my body expression is the more androgynous I look and the less curvy I look, the better I feel about how I look.
Gotcha.
And the more womanly I feel like I look, the less comfort I have because I'm worried about how other people are assuming they should interact with me based on what I look like.
Right. So the first time we talked about this, I was fascinated because I think I understood some of what you meant, and then some of it I needed more clarification on. And I think in the end, I did end up understanding that you are uncomfortable with being sexually objectified. And I don't think that's like exclusive to somebody who doesn't identify as a cis binary gender. I think we talked about this because I was just about to start my GHT, which is gender affirming hormone therapy. And I was trying to describe to you like the level of freak out and creep factor that I feel whenever I perceive someone perceiving me as a woman, which I'm not, based on my looks. They'll interact with me as they would with their idea of what a woman is, especially if the other person is somebody who's attracted to women. I feel like there is that undertone and that underlying expectation that you will be, of course, you're open to being sexually objectified. Of course, you are open to other people finding you sexually attractive or desirable in a way that's very specific to women.
There's an expectation that women desire to be considered attractive the most, and that is their utmost desire in the world. And so showing them that objectification and attention is supposed to be a compliment. This is what I have gathered based on all of my interactions with the world. That is the perception, I think. I don't understand any of it.
I totally agree with that, and I am also equally confused a lot of the times, but the way you described how you're okay with being seen as a femme person, just not a woman with all those expectations attached, I thought that was a really interesting differentiation. And now also I've learned a new word today, twunk.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Can I ask, when did you start feeling this way? I mean, I don't know if there's actually like an exact point in time when somebody starts feeling this way. Like, I don't know. I've always felt like I was non-binary, but maybe there are points in time in my life experiences where it was really highlighted to me that I am not comfortable with the gender I was assigned at birth and the way that people perceive me according to that. If you had a moment or moments like that, what would those be?
Number one, a lot of the way that I express has to do with my childhood trauma and the fact that I have an ingrained, deep-seated fear of cis men due to childhood trauma. In addition, unconnected to that, it slowly built over time as I became older and I had less control over what my body looked like because hormones started to control it.
Right.
I was a dancer, and you have to be very comfortable with your body as a dancer because you have to wear and be in front of the mirror and checking your posture and checking everything all the time. And there was always something that just felt not quite right. And I always wished that my body looked slightly different, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. Then as an adult, I started being very forward with everybody that I met about being asexual and aromantic and not being interested, because I found that that was a really good way to establish boundaries with people. And again, that was because I was extremely uncomfortable not knowing whether or not I could trust that this person is being sincere with me, or if this person is trying to objectify and or suggest something to me.
Yeah. Was that mostly centered around interacting with cis men, or was that like everybody for you?
Well, I've always had more femme or female friends than I've had male friends, and I've had a few male friendships sort of end sourly in terms of expectations. And so I became comfortable talking about things with my female friends more. And then as I started to sort of move out in the world and interact with more people as an adult, I just learned that if I'm very upfront with my sexuality, with the men around me,
As in your asexuality?
yes, then they either get intrigued and ask me questions about it, or they understand that whatever they were trying to do is not going to happen, and they leave me alone. That way it's very easy for me to distinguish between people who actually want to spend time with me and be my friend, and people who are just there to objectify me and or try to start something.
Yeah. So it's like communicating your boundaries and your expectations in a world where allosexuality, well, sexuality and feeling sexually attracted to somebody and feeling romantic attraction to somebody is sort of the given.
Yes.
So I'm curious, let's say when you tell people this, what are the most common reactions?
It tends to depend on whether or not they're queer.
Right.
The most common reaction I get is, "What's that?"
You mean asexuality?
Yes.
Being ace?
The most common question I get is that people have no idea what I'm talking about. If they are somewhere in the queer spaces, or at least friends with people who are queer, they might know and they just sort of say okay and accept it. I've had a lot of problems with straight cis men and some straight cis women who don't understand and ask me a lot of questions, because they ask me a lot of questions in a way that feels like they don't believe me. Like, I get a lot of questions, but so why don't you just date for fun? And I was like, have you ever heard anyone talk about dating? It's the least fun thing that I can imagine. How about I just go meet friends and we're just friends? Why do I have to date them in order to meet up with them and have fun?
Yeah.
So mostly I get a lot of, "What is that?" or, "Okay, cool, bye."
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's very relatable. The reactions you've described are very similar to the reactions that I get when I talk about my gender or my pronouns. And yeah, it's interesting because when you tell people this part of yourself, whether it's asexuality, aromanticism, or your gender identity, it does affect the way that the other person gets to perceive you. If they don't get it, they're not going to get it. But you're putting something out there about yourself where you're like, yeah, so the way that you interact with cis people, alloromantic people, allosexual people, is going to be slightly different with me. So I think it's always interesting to see that. And yeah, I just like that there is a common ground.
Yeah.
Between our experiences.
I will also say that most of the time when I spend time with people who are around our age or younger, there tends to be fewer questions. But like 5 years ago, when I didn't have such a close-knit group of queer friends, it tended to be much more, I'm in a room of cis allo people who have never heard of the word asexual before.
Yeah.
But even now, I have a couple of really close queer friends who didn't know about asexuality until I told them what it was. But at least with queer people, most of the time, all of my queer friends are not exclusionists in any way. So when they learn, they're just generally asking, oh, I didn't know about this. Tell me so that I can understand you better. And that feels really nice.
Yeah. I think that is when you are with someone who is learning about a part of your identity for the first time, or it's a part of your identity is a new concept to them in general. It is really wonderful for their reaction to be, oh, I don't know what that is. Let me understand you. And don't make you feel like you have to explain everything to them. Just an acknowledgement of, oh, I have no knowledge of this. This is new to me. So let me not judge or have a reaction to this because I don't know what it is. And then just kind of give themselves a chance to learn about it before really discussing it further. Or, it doesn't really have to be an issue. If you don't understand something and it is relevant to the way that you interact with this person, then you just ask questions pertaining to your specific interaction with them on that front, right?
Yeah. I have one friend who has been part of the queer community for a long time, but she doesn't necessarily have a very strong sense of, I need to have a very clear, identifiable identity. I don't want to say anything specific because I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she is a little bit older than I am, and she didn't grow up on the internet as much as I did. So she was one of the queer people who I had to explain what asexuality and aromanticism was. And when she learned that there were some people who don't believe that asexuals and the ace spectrum people should be part of the queer community because they pass to a certain extent, or because they don't have the opposite sort of same-sex types of issues, she was absolutely horrified and taken aback and thinking, how on earth could anybody possibly think this way? But at the same time, she had never even heard of asexuality when I first met her. I think she said it best when she said, you just have to respect people. For some people, having a specific label is really important to them, and so you respect that. They know themselves best. And for some people like her, having a specific label beyond queer isn't as important to her, and that works for her, But the main thing is you just have to respect what people need because they're communicating that to you by telling it to you.
Exactly. I 100% agree. When someone is expressing to you where they're coming from, who they are, it's because it's not for shits and giggles. Yeah. It's because everybody has boundaries, and expressing those boundaries is actually expressing like a willingness to interact with you in a way that is comfortable and safe. And if you are someone who can respect that and just respect that, then I don't think it matters as much as some people maybe worry whether or not you have like full knowledge of what the other person is talking about. I do think that respect matters a lot more sometimes than understanding. And it's just sad that some people, just because they don't have that understanding that resonates with them personally, they find it kind of really hard to respect those realities in other people, and those boundaries. I think it's changing slowly, but for a long time, I feel like the world that I grew up in, society, culturally, we didn't have a great awareness of the concept of boundaries and the fact that it's very natural for everybody to be different in how they identify or how they are made, and that it's actually important to listen to people when they tell you, and that it's also okay to express your identity, your needs, your boundaries. So I feel like that friend is a great example of someone who understands that. You know, it's a very simple thing in interacting with other humans, but I think in a world where so much is assumed to be the norm, sometimes that's not super common.
Unfortunately, that is the way a lot of the time.
I didn't know that there was a part of the larger queer community that was sort of wants to exclude el-wez people from the community. But there are people who want to exclude any group of people from their community, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are definitely people who don't want trans people in the queer community, bi people in the community, and it's just for all sorts of reasons. And I'm like,
The purpose of the community is that we are all outside of the assumed norm. And so
Exactly.
because we are minorities who can have struggles, we gather together as a part of a community to support each other, and so therefore we all belong.
exactly. In an ideal world, we would all belong to
No
just... Yeah.
No matter what.
No matter what. But the reason that we have a community is because we are excluded from, quote unquote, the norm. And I was having a conversation with a friend in the queer community the other day who identifies differently from me. And she's older than me, she's been around for a lot longer than me. And we kind of both agreed that it was sort of incomprehensible and yet kind of expected that even in the marginalized community of queer people who know what it's like to be marginalized, who know what it's like to be excluded, still some people find a way to do that exact harm to other members of the community. And especially, this happens a lot, like, at least that we've seen from members of the community who have, like, a more, like, mainstream status in the mainstream cultural understanding toward people who have a less of a stronghold in the public understanding of their identities or orientations, etc.
As someone who grew up not knowing that there was more options than just gay or straight, I understand very strongly that a lot of the times some parts of the group are just less visible, especially in the past when there weren't a lot of resources to just find a lot of information and a lot of stories just at your fingertips. Luckily, I've never had a lot of exclusionism pointed directly at me personally, but when I first realized that I was asexual and was a part of this community, some of the first things I saw were back and forths between others about whether or not asexuality should be part of the community. And that was my introduction to being queer.
That's horrific. I'm sorry that was your first experience.
Yeah, I never really felt like I belonged to the queer community until very recently, when I started to have bisexual friends or lesbian friends or trans friends who just said, let's go to Pride together, or welcome, it's so great to have another person to join our queer community, and accepted me loudly as part of their group. And it started to make me feel like I belonged in part of the community, and it was really wonderful.
I love to hear that. You and I talk pretty regularly about the challenges of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. You know, we don't have the same kinds of neurodivergence. I'm still trying to figure out the specifics of my own neurodivergence. But one of the things that has really helped me to look more closely at what's going on with me and makes me more curious about finding out about the different types of neurodivergence that exist is having conversations with you about your own neurodivergence, which you're very open about. And so tell us more about that.
Well, I have had struggles with mental illness in terms of anxiety, depression, and those sorts of things as a child and as a teen and as a young adult. But I think a very big part of it was that I lived until very, very, very recently ago as an undiagnosed person with ADHD. And a lot of when you're struggling to figure out why you can't do something that everybody else seems to be able to do, it can cause a lot of stress and lead to a lot of other mental health problems.
Completely.
What specifically should I talk about first?
When you just said that, you reminded me so much of Sherry, who is one of my old bosses at Puda. She talks it out of my mouth really loudly all the time. It's great. You could start by talking about like how being diagnosed has helped you.
Okay. So I never assumed that I had anything other than, it feels weird to say, but like your standard social anxiety, depression, existential problems at coming to terms with the reality of life on Earth.
Right, which are significant.
Yes, but in one way, the pandemic gave me a chance to slow down. And in slowing down, I made the specific choice that since I couldn't go anywhere or do anything or see people frequently, I was going to spend that time to work on myself. I'd had multiple moments in years previous where my anxiety was just getting so horrible that I was just like, I need to do something about this. But it wasn't until the pandemic when I actually did go out and I had a friend who could recommend me some therapy and counseling services and some psychiatry services. And I finally went there and I started working through a lot of different things. And as I was working through things and trying to improve my anxiety and improve a lot of things, there were specific parts of my motivation and my ability to complete tasks which just consistently couldn't change. So it was suggested that I go get checked for ADHD because a lot of the things I was saying sounded possible, you know? So then I was officially diagnosed, and ever since then I've been taking medication which helps me a lot at my job for the most part. It can still be difficult to like get myself going, but it has really made a huge impact on my ability to live well and my ability to have a work-life balance. And I really wish that the resources that I have now, I was able to give myself as a child. Because again, as a child, I just thought, this is what everybody struggles with. This is what everybody feels like inside. And they just push through, and I'm just not working hard enough. I'm just being lazy. I'm just being whatever. And that's the reason why I'm not doing what everybody else is doing. And I think it's really harmful to not sort of check in with kids to make sure that what they're showing on the outside is really what they're feeling on the inside. Because I just sort of had to mask all of my struggles because I thought that it was me not being good enough or being too lazy, which was why I was struggling to do things that someone my age who was not neurodivergent would be able to do. And now as an adult, it is much easier, and with resources, it's much easier, but it's still a big learning process. Yeah. I have to learn different strategies to sort of trick my brain into doing things that it doesn't want to do. And additionally, something that I've recently found out about is, I don't know how common a phrase it is, but there is a YouTuber that I watch who makes ADHD content. And they specifically say that an ADHD brain tends to function on urgency. And there's a specific phrase that this YouTuber uses called important but not urgent. And it's one of the most difficult things for people with ADHD to focus on.
Yeah.
It's an important thing. I have a lot of passion for it. I have a lot of drive to work on it, but it isn't urgent right now. And right now, there are all of these 12 other things that I put off because of anxiety or because of a lack of dopamine or because something else was more urgent then. And she uses the analogy of like, you wait until it's become a fire and then you spend your whole life putting out fires. You can never work on the important but not urgent things because you're so busy putting out the urgent fires. Then you're living constantly in a state of being burnt out because you're constantly putting out all of the fires at the last minute. And so that's something that I'm really working on right now, is trying to figure out a way to structure and get my brain going on projects, even though it's not urgent right at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Like creative projects?
Creative projects, but also work projects.
Work projects too, right. Okay, so I'm always completely flabbergasted by the amount of grading that you have to do. Like, I have other teacher friends, so I am familiar with the concept. My sister-in-law actually used to be a teacher. So I know that in any line of work, sometimes you bring work home. But I remember vividly last summer when you were on a holiday and you were very excited about the things that you get to do and not do, and you were looking forward to relaxing, and I think you spent at least half of it grading and then like some more time preparing for the next semester, right?
Yeah, we recently just had Chuseok and then Hangeul Day.
Yep.
And so we had quite a few days off. And out of the 5 days that I had off, I spent 40 hours working specifically on grading.
So I imagine that's not helpful for the things that you struggle with.
No, but also specifically grading and having my brain shut down every single time I try to grade, because I find it an onerous task and a really unfulfilling and ungratifying task, was one of the main struggles that I was having that led to me being diagnosed.
Right.
So it's gotten a lot better now that I'm medicated and now that I'm working on coping skills and all of that. But it still remains one of my top struggles, is to keep on top of grading, because there's always something else that's more urgent, like making sure I have a class to teach today versus grading a writing assignment from last week.
Yeah. Yeah. I also have had conversations with you about your sleep cycle, your sort of circadian rhythm being out of sync with how like 9 to 5 jobs work. I mean, you don't really work 9 to 5, not exactly.
No, I work afternoons, which is much better for me personally.
Yeah.
But even just in the past couple of weeks, my brain suddenly decided that instead of going to bed at 2 or 3 like I normally do and waking up at 11, so that I could have a couple of hours to get ready and like wake my brain up before going to work, it didn't want to go to sleep until like 7 a.m. and not wake up until 4, which doesn't work when you start work in the early afternoon. So I know that there's been some research done about correlating ADHD with sleep problems. I found out that I have something called periodic limb movement disorder, which is, do you know restless leg syndrome?
Yes, but can you describe it to
So
listeners?
restless leg syndrome is sort of when your muscles just sort of contract and move without you telling them to. And it makes it very difficult for people to sit still. A lot of times it happens when you're sort of tired and about to go to bed, and it prevents you from falling asleep.
Right.
Periodic limb movement disorder is exactly the same thing, but it's while you're asleep. And in addition to having mild sleep apnea, I had this periodic limb movement disorder due to the decrease in dopamine in my brain, which is probably related to the ADHD, because a decrease in dopamine is one of the major parts of ADHD.
Okay.
For anybody who doesn't know, dopamine isn't really like a happy, my teacher is going to come out. I was about to say, your happy brain juice. It isn't really.
You can't say that. It's fine. Yeah.
I tell my students, instead of saying chemical, I say brain juice. But dopamine isn't really a happy brain juice. It's more of a motivation and a desire to do something neurotransmitter. And so not having enough dopamine makes it really difficult for people with ADHD to get started on tasks. Right. There's a lot of like task inertia. There's a lot of difficulty in knowing how long a task is taking. There's a lot of time blindness. So that lack of dopamine is also related to periodic limb movement disorder. And then I also have very mild subclinical hypothyroidism, which in addition to family history is very related to sleep apnea. And between the two of those, when I went to the sleep doctor, I found out that I was waking up like 300 something times every hour.
What?
Yeah. So I basically hadn't had a good night's sleep in probably 10 years. And now that I'm taking medication to sort of help calm down my restless legs, and I have a mouth guard to help with my sleep apnea, and I'm taking a thyroid medication to help with my hypothyroidism, a lot of my sleep is getting a lot better, but I still do have sort of an off normal or off societally expected circadian rhythm. Which is difficult when you start work in the afternoon, so the only time things are open for you to do things is before work, and before work is when you sleep. Because doctors' offices are not open at 2 a.m.
Yeah, that's really tricky. I remember you telling me about this, and I was like, I'm one of those like weird people. I think I inherited genes from both sides of my parents. So my dad is like a super, super early bird, and my mom is a night owl. And I feel like when I was younger, I had no reason to feel motivated to get up early in the morning, right? So I was more of a night owl. I like to stay up late and just like draw and like, you know, fantasize about whatever, just read books by myself late at night. And then as I got older and I got to run my own schedule to a certain extent, I found myself getting up at like 6:30, 7 in the morning, and that isn't like a hardship for me. So I've never had that issue with my sleep cycle, my natural sleep cycle being off the mainstream business hours. And so when you told me that story, I was like, holy crap. Yeah, how do you get anything done then outside of work? You told me about needing to buy food and not being able to do that, like buying groceries. Going to the bank is really hard. And yeah, going to the doctor's office, which of course you need to do. What do you do? How do you cope?
Well, I don't eat as healthy as I should. But
how many of us really does?
I used to eat a lot healthier.
Okay.
Because I lived with my parents, and so they did the grocery shopping, and I would request specific items, and it was a lot easier. But luckily, or unfortunately, because capitalism, Coupang Fresh has been really, really helpful, because as they've been expanding...
Just as a explanation
for
people who don't live in Korea, Coupang Fresh is the grocery delivery service.
Yeah.
Right? We have like maybe 2 or 3 apps that are popular that does this now. You have a food delivery app where you can also order groceries, and they will get it to you like within 30 minutes, which is really like convenient. We do also have like online websites where you can order groceries from.
I just find that Coupang Fresh specifically is the most convenient for me. I order a lot of vegan or vegetarian frozen food. That way I have quick meals that I can use whenever I need to. And again, I would probably pay someone a lot of money to prepare fresh vegetables and fruit for me so that I could eat healthier. But it's also very difficult to keep up with that kind of thing on my own.
Yeah. So that's what you do for food.
Oh, right. Yes.
We both zoned out just now.
Yeah. For other things, I often find that getting a buddy to plan to go to the bank at the same time, or to make a specific time where I'm going to meet someone and we're going to go to this place before work together, is very helpful, because that slight increase of I can't be late because that will inconvenience my friend gets my body moving a lot better than I need to go to the doctor to get some new medication refills for me does. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, I just end up having to use all of my weekend time to do things, because a lot of the time I can't do something during the week. So I go and spend extra time on the weekend to go farther away to find a bank that's open on a Saturday.
Right. Yeah. Modern society, man. What is this?
Online, a lot of it is called paying the ADHD fee in advance. Fresh vegetables or pre-cut vegetables will like cost a little bit more than just buying vegetables and cutting them yourself. But if you know yourself really well and you know that you're not going to cut those vegetables and they're just going to go bad in your fridge, would you rather spend more on the pre-cut vegetables that you might actually use rather than wanting to save the money and then let them go bad in your fridge anyway? You know, paying the ADHD fee in advance.
Yeah.
If I can add one more story from pre-ADHD diagnosis, the job I had before this, it was not an afternoon schedule like the one I currently have. It was a kindergarten split academy. So in the morning, or like from 9 something to maybe about 2 o'clock, there would be a set of kindergarten students who would be there every day in your academy, and they would be your kindergarten academy students. And then after that, from 2 till about like 5 or 7, depending on the day, there would be elementary school and middle school students who came after their public school to do their ones. And when I was forcing myself to live in that circadian rhythm of having to be awake and at work at 9:30 every day, every single day at 2 o'clock, I would start to just fall asleep uncontrollably. I started drinking coffee, and I have never drunk coffee in my life because I was falling asleep standing up while teaching.
Oh, wow.
At that point, I definitely had sleep issues that I was unaware of, that were being untreated. But also just, I was so tired from waking up early that afternoon slump, it would hit me no matter what. And I couldn't avoid it.
Yeah. It's like, again, going back to the mainstream cultural understanding of normalcy and abnormalcy. Not even normalcy, but just kind of, there are just these widespread assumptions about people, the way they should be, or the way we should function. And I feel that, I don't know, someone like my dad, for example, would just say, you're just not trying hard enough to make your body work for you. You can train yourself, and like it's just a matter of like willpower. I don't have a ton of knowledge about this, and I don't have any medical like background. But I did have a university friend who definitely had a different circadian rhythm to most other people around her. And she had almost like a 25-hour rhythm where that was just how her body worked. So her day or night, depending on how you look at it, everybody else's full day is more or less 24 hours, let's say. But her day was 25 hours. And so each day she was kind of almost losing an hour. I don't know if that's the right way to say this, but her day was being pushed. So she was not in sync with her university schedule. And like she did a great job of staying on top of projects and, you know, handing in assignments and stuff, but she was very aware of the fact that she had this difference. And she made a point to explain it to people that this was a real physiological difference that she had. And the way that she talked about it was very informed and very non-judgmental of herself, which I really learned a lot from. And I think from what she told me, she had a much better understanding of what was happening because there are a lot of scientists in her family, and some of them were neuroscientists. So she just had more information about the fact that this can happen. This is a real difference in people's physiologies. So that was the first time I got to learn that there is a real actual difference in how people's bodies work. Yeah, having that friend to like speak to me about what her body does and how it is actually different from the way my body works was super helpful. And I feel like that's not always necessarily the case. If you don't have that understanding and nobody else around you has that understanding, it is much harder.
I will just say, I think it's an absolute travesty that the modern schooling system around the world has failed people so much that people have such a small grasp of the concept of how their bodies work. And how people's bodies work and how variation works. But I also say this from a very biased source because I am a scientist at heart.
Yeah, you studied biology in university?
Yeah, I studied animal behavior, ecology, and conservation. And then when I went to my master's, I also studied environmentalism from like an interdisciplinary sort of thing. So very biology based.
Yeah, and diversity is nature's answer to all
survival.
Yeah. That's what I've heard.
I think a lot of the way that people learn about evolution is sort of the same way that people think about progress and the evolution of technology. They look at it as like sort of goal-oriented, whereas evolution just happens because things happen and it causes some organisms to die and some organisms to live and have offspring. And you never know what the situation is going to have in store for the future. So by having a lot of different types of traits and a lot of variation and a lot of diversity, a species is the best setup to survive whatever apocalyptic catastrophe could possibly happen in the future. So diversity and variation within a species is rewarded by nature and rewarded by evolution. And when I say rewarded, I just mean with survival. They don't go extinct. So it's really the most natural thing to expect. But I think a lot of it is because our education system doesn't always support the main pillars of education, and it more supports memorization and learning how to be a cog in the machine of society rather than academic inquisitiveness.
Yeah.
Which that takes all the fun out of science.
Yes. I also think that about every subject I ever learned while in school.
Yes.
It's so sad. And as an adult, I feel like I'm rediscovering that I do have a passion for learning. And it works for me when I can expose myself to new information when I'm ready, when my brain is actually ready to take in that information, as opposed to having it shoved down my throat.
Yes.
At whenever is convenient for this society.
I wholeheartedly agree. I love reading. I have always loved reading. Reading has been my escape and my serene haven throughout my entire life. English literature and English language arts were almost always consistently my least favorite subjects in school because it was forcing a story and forcing a lesson rather than letting us experience the story and come to our own conclusions. Like in high school, they always want you to read all of the classics. I hated every single classic I read in high school. Every single classic I read on my own after high school, I have adored.
Yeah.
Well,
It takes...
not every single one, but
Not
most of
every
them.
Not every single one. Yeah, I think that taking away of our autonomy in so many ways. Like, we've talked about this before. We've talked about the way that we are kind of made to adhere to very rigid standards of what's allowed and what's not allowed since like early childhood. And actually that's very unnatural. And we say like it's taking the fun out of it. And that's true. But also on a deeper level, what it's also doing is like taking away the drive, the motivation to go out and discover and to find out things for yourself. And you become very used to like being passive in taking in whatever is just shown to you or given to you. And it's almost seen as a negative thing sometimes to question what's being presented to you as a fact. And I feel like, you know, that curiosity and motivation to just like discover for yourself what is the case. And there are so many things to discover in this world, and they all mean different things to different people. By taking away that drive, I feel like you're taking away that kind of inherent energy that we have, like quality of like being alive that we have as children. And I don't know, I always feel kind of like whenever I see people sitting on the subway and kind of looking tired. I know like none of this is like original thought or anything, but I do reflect on that a lot, because every time I learn something interesting or new, I'm like, wait, what? Like, this world is a crazy place and I love it.
I 1000% agree. And I have to tell you that a group of my friends, we have a group chat specifically dedicated to what we call factual attacks. So whenever we learn something really fun, we can just share it there. And then we all get to share the excitement of learning something new. And it's my favorite. And like, as an academy teacher, there are certain things that I have to do because that's how the school works. That's how the academy does their grading system. That's how the academy does their decision making. So there are certain things that like I have to do in my classes, but I also like the fact that at this academy specifically, I get the freedom to emphasize what I think is most important, which is giving the kids a chance to discover new things and be wowed by new information and find ways that information from different subjects connects in a way that they never could have imagined. And one of my absolute favorite things is when I get emails from old students telling me, I was doing this thing at school, or I was doing this thing at whatever, And I remembered your class, and I was just remembering how every single time it was so amazing because it was the first time I thought of connecting this and this together. Or I had never heard about the such and such topic, but then someone asked a question and you spent 30 minutes of our lesson going off topic to go discover it with us. And it was amazing. And that's really one of the most rewarding things to me, because I think the most important thing that I can do as a teacher is to support their interest and their desire to learn.
Yeah.
If they're studying to take a test so that they can pass the test, they're not going to remember anything the next day. And that's just an unfortunate way that like a grades-based system works. But if you give them the chance to explore interesting things, they'll be interested and they can go off and discover and learn on their own, which is really the only way you ever learn.
Right. And learning inherently, I personally think that it should serve you, right?
Yes.
In your life as you live it. So having a bunch of information, that doesn't really have any input into that is, I remember some things from, like, I studied in the UK, so I did, I studied for the GCSEs and then for A levels. But I remember a lot of things that I learned and that I feel like it's just taking up space. And the only time those pieces of knowledge that really comes in handy is like when you're speaking to somebody else who also has a similar educational background. But I don't know if I'm gonna want to have a relationship with that person, you know what I mean? It's a very subjective way of looking at the world, and I am aware of that. But point is that none of it really felt real to me. It didn't feel experiential. It was just words crammed into your brain when your brain should really be developing and being exposed to like so many different stimuli as it develops. And I do feel some sort of a sense of like missed opportunities in that sense. Almost like, wow, my brain was so supple and it had so much room to grow in so many different ways. And I spent most of it sitting down at a desk, trying to remember stuff, like you said, and that I don't really care about anymore. And so
the good news is, I would just like to say this because I have learned this recently because I spend too much time online watching video essays. But
I love video essays. Love them.
I know.
Anyway.
There is a common misconception that your brain stops developing when you're 25. There was a very famous study where they were trying to prove that your brain continues developing into your 20s. However, a lot of people use this as an excuse to say, your brain is still developing, so when you're in your early 20s, you're still a proto-adult. But the thing is, the study that they're using for all of this, the oldest participant they had was 25. Your brain never stops growing, ever.
I'm sorry, I feel like when you look into a lot of scientific studies that are widely quoted or popularly quoted and then just like take hold of what we think of as common sense, these are like things that you find. Like, this is a limitation in the sample that they used. And it's just such a simple thing that nobody thinks to mention.
It's because all of the journals are written in scientific jargon and hidden behind paywalls.
Yeah.
I have a vendetta against scientific language and paywalls specifically, because it means I can't look at scientific resources now that I am not a student.
Right. One of my favorite podcasts that I listen to deals a lot with, I like to listen to podcasts that is like research heavy, and usually that means they look at a lot of like scientific data and like research about different issues and different subjects. And one of the things that keeps coming up is that science communication is really difficult because there are so many different like subtle differentiations made in the approach and like in just the entire process, and then like interpreting the data that you have. And it's like with any experience that happens in life, like it is hard for people who are not there and like really keyed into the specifics of whatever study it is to understand what it means. So
And then they're being interpreted by journalists who are not necessarily scientific experts, and then they become very popularized and they become simplified so that everybody can understand them. But then when they become simplified, you tend to miss out on a lot of really important key aspects.
exactly. So our takeaway is that the brain never stops growing. And yeah, the only reason that we think that the brain stops developing at 25 is because the study that that information is quoted from only had participants up to the age of 25.
Yes.
Right.
On the subject of brains, I would just like to include a generalized pep talk because I had this pep talk with two of my really good friends who are both writers, and there was one particular person who was just saying, what do I have if I'm not a teacher? I don't want to go be a janitor. There is nothing else for me. And we were talking about how society inadvertently and on purpose brainwashes you into believing that specific things are what you have to do. And the problem with this is that the more you think something, the more it gets physically coded into your brain. Your brain builds synapses and connections between different cells the more you think about something. So when people are saying it's mind over matter, it's not that simple. But when people say you shouldn't make self-deprecating jokes or you shouldn't think so badly about yourself, you should practice self-love and that kind of thing, there is a really important reason why. Because if you constantly make self-deprecating jokes, if you constantly think negative thought spirals, you are growing those connections in your brain and you're making them stronger. And because your brain is your reality, you are making that reality true. If you can find ways to rewrite the narratives that your brain goes down, it's difficult and it takes time, but you can grow new pathways in your brain no matter what. Mm-hmm. The past 5 years, I spent regrowing my body, my self-image and my self-worth based on my body. Mm. Specifically, I always had really, really, really horrible self-loathing for my thighs. I'm just built this way. I carry extra in my thighs. I've always been around dancers who are always very slim and very slender and very long. And I've always been self-conscious of my thighs. And at one point, I sat there, I looked at my thighs, and I just said, if I'm ever going to be healthy and if I'm ever going to love myself and live a life worth living, I need to be able to accept myself as I am, because every time I think negative thoughts, I'm ingraining that negativity and etching it physically into my brain. So I looked at myself and I looked at my thighs and I knew, well, usually the self-deprecating joke is thunder thighs. And so I said, you know what? Thunder thighs are a blessing of the god of thunder herself. She came upon me as I was born and she blessed my thighs. You know, my thighs aren't even thunderous. They are a thunderstorm and a half each.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm.
And it made me laugh so hard. I can't even explain to you how funny I found it because I was just crying laughing when I thought of it the first time. And then every single time I would put clothes on, I would just be like, look at those thighs. Thor herself would be so proud. Thor blessed these thighs, and these thighs are a thunderstorm and a half. And I slowly, just over time, those new pathways brought joy and happiness to a place where there was anger, suffering, and hurt, and rewrote those physical paths in my brain. And it's not that it is easy. It's not that it isn't difficult. We live in a very difficult world. Mm-hmm. But it is possible to train your brain and to teach your brain to love yourself and to go for things that will help you rather than hurt you.
Yeah, rewriting the narrative, your self-narrative about many different things. I feel like there is more messaging around that and how very, very possible it is. Not easy, but very possible, is more visible now.
Yes.
And I'm really glad that it made you laugh so hard. Because I was really trying my best to hold myself from screaming into the mic. I love that. I really love that. And also I have to say, I never understood why they call it thunder thighs. What is the meaning of that expression? I've heard it, but...
I believe it comes from your thighs rubbed together. Mm-hmm. And so they make noise. And they say oh, your thighs are crashing together because they're so loud.
I see. Okay.
And I mean, I grew up in the super skinny thigh gap realm of the internet, so it was tough.
Huh.
I have thunderstorm and a half thighs now, and I'm very happy with them.
And they are awesome because they are a part of you. Yeah. And I think you're awesome.
I think you're awesome.
Aww. Speaking of rewriting your narratives, is there anything that you feel that your neurodivergence enables you to do that you might not have access to otherwise?
I'm still currently in a bit of a struggle with finding a good balance, but I will say that when I am interested, I am so interested, and I will devour absolutely any information about a topic that I'm interested in. If I'm uninterested, my brain will cause me to fall asleep. But if I am interested, I can learn so much so quickly. And it just leads to a lot of really random trivia that I know and really random facts, but also a really well-connected memory because my brain is constantly connecting things to other things. So if I jog my memory from one moment, I can often trigger other memories of other things that I know.
Right.
So I find that although I have some memory struggles with ADHD, I also have a lot of really good memory for facts and putting things together in a very chaotic type of organization. And I also think that, in addition, it makes me very creative. I have a very active imagination, and I make up stuff right on the spot very, very frequently as a D&D player and as a teacher. It is very, very helpful to just be able to go with the flow and create new narratives and create new ideas on the drop of a hat. And I do think that the way that my brain processes information allows me to be creative and imaginative very quickly in that way.
Yeah. Just by being your friend, I have seen your creative projects, which are really, really interesting to me. And I'm like, how do you come up with this stuff? Like evolution of fantastical creatures in a way that makes sense. And just like the way that you appreciate having creative projects and taking part in creative projects, I think also lets you appreciate like other people's creative projects. And it's just like a very positive loop of having something very joyful and very, I think, important and necessary in your life in a way and to a degree that not a lot of people get to have, because a lot of us get trained to believe that you have to do things a certain way and you have to live life a certain way. So that's something that I like really recognize about you and appreciate about you. Yeah, you're just a joy to be around, and I think that is one of your superpowers.
That's
right?
really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I believe very strongly that everyone is allowed to be whoever they want to be. And society may not like that, but society has to grow up and deal with it.
Good.
So
Good saying.
I'm really glad that that shines through,
Yes.
even when I don't intend for that to be like a message that I'm sending.
I feel like the way you exist is the message you're sending. Because I remember you just like casually showed me a picture of you that one time when you wore a crown made of leaves to work, and you were like, nobody really cared, and you looked amazing. So I'm like, yeah, why not? Why don't we all wear crowns and tiaras to work every day? Like, there's no rules against it in most workplaces, so why not? You know, like, I like that little bit of magic in everyday life. People like it. People like it when they see someone enjoy themselves and be creative, and yeah, just...
We really have a chance to bring joy to the world by expressing ourselves and appreciating when other people express themselves.
Completely, yeah, exactly. And like try to withhold judgment, you know, because a lot of that is just learned reactions, and it might not actually be in line with who you are and what you naturally appreciate. Yeah, just to borrow your expression from earlier, society needs to grow up so that it can have fun again. You know, it can like accept fun as part of life in a way that's not always conventional.
That just reminded me of the prelude to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because C.S. Lewis wrote it for his niece. And he said, I didn't realize that fairy stories grow much slower than little girls. So by the time I'm actually done writing this story, you're a bit too old to appreciate fairy stories. But luckily, at some point, you become even older to realize that fairy stories are for everyone again. And I hope then you can pick this book back up and appreciate what I made for you. And I have felt those words deep in my soul so much.
Oh my gosh. That just sent chills down my back. That is so beautiful and so true. If you had an ideal work-life balance, what would it look like? Or if you had an ideal life, maybe it doesn't even include work, what would that look like for you?
I think I would be doing a lot less
Grading?
yes. But also a lot less. It's not that I don't like interacting with people. I very much appreciate it. But I also feel like a lot of the times it takes a lot of effort to do a lot of the things that I'm doing in my current job. And whether it is the students or the students' parents or the administration not appreciating that effort, or whether it's just me not being able to understand and see their appreciation, I feel like that a lot of the time can get me down. So I know I've always been very happy in more mundane tasks, I guess. I like being creative, but I love taking care of animals. And when I worked at a bookstore, my favorite job was going through and organizing and alphabetizing and resetting the shelves. And I love having conversations and talking to people and teaching in general. But I don't like it when students are being forced to be there but don't care.
Yes.
Because then it feels like I'm wasting my energy on people who don't want it. And so I want to save my energy for the people who do want it, because there are some students who really, really love it. So like I would love to sort of teach or interact with kids in a more like scientific exploration kind of way, where it's like a fun summer camp where we do experiments in different topics. And there are no tests, and the only thing you have to do is like show that you can communicate your answers effectively, scientific communication, rather than like how to write an opinion paragraph and do MLA format. But other than that, specific desire, I feel like a lot of my time would not necessarily be in like a conventional job. I feel like I would be really happy working in like a community garden. I feel like I would be really happy working in a library. It has always been my dream job to work at animal shelter or like an endangered species rehabilitation center. And those sorts of tasks have always felt very fulfilling to me. And so I think it would be kind of similar. I'd like to have a little space as my own where I can do my own projects on my own time, have my own little fur babies.
You're talking about animate fur babies.
Yes.
Okay.
My four-legged furry children, Aster and Nyx. I would not change them for the world.
Not the long Furby.
No. I could give her horns and claws, and I could make her sparkle and shine.
Okay. I don't know where that thought was leading down to.
I also don't know either. But to recap, I feel like I could take a lot of aspects of my current life and transform them into something more fulfilling by taking away the need for just grading in general, not grading essays and returning them, but like giving a score to students on how well they're doing. I feel like I would really enjoy just having a place where I could volunteer to go organize bookshelves, because I find that really fun and rewarding. I don't know why. I just like organizing books in alphabetical order.
I coincidentally also love organizing bookshelves in any discernible order that makes sense.
I would love to work at any place that is helping to take care of animals who need it, in terms of endangered species, in terms of animals that are without homes for whatever reason. And I think just a very like slow life where I can wake up when I need to. I can spend time doing my own creative work. I can go and work in a community garden. I can go alphabetize the local library. I can go and explore science with kids who are excited about it. And then I can come back to my house and read and draw and do other activities for myself, just sort of on my own time schedule. I think that would be the goal for me.
Yeah. First of all, listening to you talk, kind of like a scene from like a science fiction movie came to mind. Maybe in like 30, 40 years time, we could have a community where things like that are possible, and rather than a home to come back to. You would have like a pod to come back to, and you have everything you need there. What you're describing sounds to me like a slightly more communal lifestyle than the one that we currently, a lot of us live in.
Definitely.
So would you ever volunteer or consider working at a shelter that also happens to have a library?
That is where I feel a little bit stuck because living in Korea and working as a teacher, there are kind of limited options in terms of visas and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to live in North America where there are other options, but other specific things are less available. So I find that currently the way I have my life right now and what's available to me, living in Korea as a teacher, is the best balance that I have right now. Maybe in the future, I'll be able to find a way to make more outside of work time possible to volunteer, because I would love to.
Yeah.
But as it is right now, work does take up so much of my energy that I don't have the social battery or the energy for it.
Yeah, you're already dealing with the time zone difference between your internal clock and like the outside world clock.
I think more specifically in terms of a life goal or in terms of what you imagine as your best life, I think that's really difficult to see unless you really think about it, though, because I grew up being the smart kid and being constantly told, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever your heart desires. You're so smart. You can make any dream come true, blah, 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 blah. But then I never really learned what the possibilities were. No one ever gave me any ideas of, like, asked me what I was interested in and asked me what sorts of things made me happy. Nobody, school counselors and employment fairs, they never talked about like what types of jobs are you thinking about. Here are some possibilities of things that you could work towards. And so as it is, I just felt very like I was just floating around looking for my dream job to fall out of the sky, and that's very unlikely to happen.
Right. Yeah. Being exposed to different possibilities that exist is really crucial. And also just being made to feel safe to explore and make mistakes and trials and errors. Like, yeah, putting yourself through trials and errors, giving yourself space to roam. When you're young, somebody has to give you that space. And then having those experiences and learning that it's okay to explore and experience different things rather than you have to pick one thing and then just grind yourself into it until you succeed, whatever that means. It makes a lot of people unhappy. So yes, it is important to know what you're looking for when it comes to your lifestyle and just ways to exist. But a lot of us take a long time to even realize that we're looking for something different than what we have now, and that it is a possibility to have that.
I think it definitely takes a long time because we grew up with very specific narratives, and people don't grow up saying, you can be whatever you want when you grow up. You could be a librarian. You could be a volunteer at an animal shelter. You could be a barista.
You could be a barista.
Right? There are so many jobs that just don't get mentioned.
That's so true.
Because they aren't like the popular jobs or like the ones that you talk to kids about. But they all have value and they're all worthwhile, and somebody can be really, really happy doing all of those jobs.
Yes. The kind of aspirations we're told to have, what's approved and what's encouraged is very limited a lot of the times. And yeah, why can't we be an animal groomer who lives in the woods and just takes our little, tricycle to work every day and lives with like 10, 12 dogs?
Exactly.
If that makes you happy, you better start living it.
Yeah.
Because it is important to be happy. I don't think that it's really mentioned or made to feel understood in the traditional educational system. And I feel like I'm talking a lot about education and about growing up and about, alternative ways of living while I'm talking to you, because this is a lot of the times what we talk about, everything that's wrong with this world, and also like what we see that could be better.
I think because I am in the academy system here,
Yeah.
I see a lot of things that I wish I could make changes to in regular education. And then looking back at my own history of education and how I grew up. And I know that it has taken me a really, really long time to get to this point of actually knowing what are the things that make me happy, what sort of jobs would I have if I had the choice. And if I were going back to college right now as an 18-year-old, I would say, I'm going to do a double major in this science field that I find really enjoyable, but my goal is to be a librarian because that would be the perfect job for me. But I didn't realize that until I was in my late 20s. I don't know why I never thought that being a librarian could be a job, but it just didn't cross my mind to think of that as a job.
Yeah, completely. I think if I could go back to being like 18 or whatever, or even 16, I think I would have loved to have started this back then, but podcast literally wasn't a thing. So I don't know. I mean, maybe YouTube was just starting out, but like...
And all those OG YouTubers have podcasts now.
Right. And it's not really to do with what's popular or what's mainstream, but I think I've been realizing more and more lately that I really love having conversations and sharing stories, listening to stories and collecting stories and then like passing them on. That is something that makes my heart sing, and I literally just love it. I could do it every day of my life and be completely happy. So your imagined ideals and ideals that you come up with after having lived your life and having some self-understanding about who you actually are and how you actually work and operate in the day-to-day life can be very different. And that's one of the gifts of aging and gifts of having lived lives that weren't really right for you. So yeah, just glad to be here to be talking about it with you because it means we both made it this far.
Yes. And anyone who's listening.
Yes.
Congratulations. You made it too.
Yay! We should have a party. I think this conversation really highlighted the necessity of joy, right? Having joy in your life. So, in that vein, I would like to ask you, what brings you joy right now in your life?
I've been finding a lot of joy in hand making gifts and giving them to people.
Yeah, you gave me a hand-bound notebook as a
Yeah.
gift once. I love it.
I really, really love bookbinding and learning like new skills of that type. And then also I love learning new things about the world and new facts. And I just love being able to see people that I know, whether they're my friends or they're my students or that I know in other ways, seeing them understand something and start to value themselves and start to value time that they have and making those like relationships deeper, like with my friends. And yeah, I think those would be the three big ones. I like creating, especially when I get to give creative gifts to people. I like learning about the world, and I like sharing random facts that I know to people who appreciate them.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah, like you.
I appreciate them so much. Oh, it's a delight. That's great. As somebody who has been navigating various overwhelms of life in different ways, is there anything that you do for yourself to ground and recenter yourself when things get a little bit rough or too hectic in the wrong ways?
I think the most important thing for me has been being open with people about it and knowing when to ask for help and just to do whatever they tell me to do, because sometimes my brain just gets so fried that I don't feel like a human being anymore. And I can't move and I'm dissociating and I just can't handle anything. And I can go to my phone and send a message and just say, what should I do? And my friend will tell me, go take a shower. Go over to the park across the street and sit in the trees and look for the cicadas. By being honest with myself and being honest with others who I know I can trust, I can take a lot of the pressure off of myself. In addition, I think a lot of coping is very individualized. So for me, I really value giving myself alone time, and I really value dance and moving my body to music. just around my apartment if there's nowhere else.
Yeah.
But something that's been really helping me a lot in the past couple of years has been doing, both with a therapist and on my own, research into a therapy style called DBT. And
Dialectic behavioral therapy.
yes,
Right.
it's been very effective for me in terms of both acknowledging, feeling my emotions, but not letting them run my life and overwhelm me as much. And I highly recommend it to anybody who feels overwhelmed by their emotions. Maybe not every bit of DBT is good for every single person, but I think there are so many different tools that you can find free online about DBT and research that you can do about DBT where you can find specific things that could be helpful, even just a little bit,
Yeah.
until you can find more solid help.
Yes.
I always want to encourage anyone who is feeling alone to talk to anybody about it.
Right.
Because I have spent a long time feeling very, very alone. And when you're feeling alone with your struggles, that is the worst part.
Yeah.
But when you can be open about your struggles, therapy and mental health support isn't always available for everyone all around the world, unfortunately. But finding some sort of support somewhere because you really aren't alone and doing your best with what you can find online. Doing DBT therapy by yourself or watching YouTube videos of therapists by yourself isn't going to be the same as having personalized therapy or having group therapy or anything, but it's certainly better than nothing. And you can really change your life even when it feels like you can't. It really is possible. And it can always be a struggle to start being more vulnerable with other people.
Yeah.
But I think in addition to accepting help from other people and accepting not even that you need help, but sometimes you just need to be open about this is where I am right now. This is what I need. I'm sorry if this causes trouble, but XYZ. It can be really helpful for keeping relationships around that you really value.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the times being less open can lead to isolation and to pushing friendships away.
Totally. Yeah. What are you most excited about these days?
Most excited about?
It's okay if you're not.
I've been learning the skill of DMing, of being the dungeon master and sort of leading a D&D group rather than just participating. And it has been a really interesting learning curve. And it has been a really rewarding experience. I still don't feel like I am where I want to be in terms of being good at leading the group.
Yeah.
But I'm having a lot of fun and a lot of excitement learning and trying to craft a story together and sort of being more in the driver's seat of the storytelling part. In addition, it's getting colder, and
Yeah, it
so
is.
I get to start wearing like clothes that don't make me sweat all the time. And all of my cats are being like little extra snuggly because they're starting to get a little chilly. So they like to lay on top of me instead of next to me.
That is the best.
Yeah. Apart from just my usual things that make me excited, those are some things that are making me really excited.
What is your favorite drink?
I am a huge tea fanatic.
Ah.
I find myself, unfortunately, indebted to iced matcha lattes fairly regularly to keep my brain on straight.
Okay.
However, there is nothing I enjoy more than a really good cup of just tea in a peaceful area. I tend to prefer white tea, yellow tea, or green tea. I don't mind some herbal teas, but I'm not really into anything very like sweet or sweetened. Yeah, I love tea, and I would drink it all the time, every time.
Wow, this conversation really took us on many, many tangents that were completely necessary. So thank you so much for sitting down with us at the Coffeeshop AU. You're actually one of the people who really contributed to developing this idea. So it's just really nice to be able to actually record a conversation with you. It's been a while since I started working on this project, and now we're here.
I'm really glad to be able to participate. I have loved the development, and I feel like everything that you're trying to do, like all of your goals, are just so wonderful that I feel just so grateful that I can be a part of it.
Thank you for being a part of it.
Also, thank you for persevering today, despite the situation, the circumstances.
Well, you know, I do for what I love. To whoever is listening, have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, night. And to you too, EL, have a good night.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye!
Bye.